are back. Welcome to Talk of the Bays. What's left of that Santa Cruz left? Hello, Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Capitola, Live Oak, Scotts Valley, and the San Lorenzo Valley, too. And may I also say hello to Salinas and Monterey. KSQD's signal has expanded since the last time I was here. We got a show for you at the 5 o'clock hour. On today's Talk of the Bay, we explore what is left of the Santa Cruz left. We've been through it, folks. 5 bruising election battles, beginning with rent control and followed by more ballot measure losses, including the empty homes tax, our downtown, our future, and most recently, Housing for All's Right to Vote on Height initiative. Now, throw in the recall, and the moderate conservative money has delivered a solid pro-real estate and pro-market rate housing developer city council. You may be left wondering what happened to progressive Santa Cruz and the birth of the left progressive politics more than 50 years ago when UCSC first opened its doors. We have a studio full of guests who will help discuss and ponder the roots, the reactions, and realities of the Santa Cruz community's continuing housing crisis. So stay tuned. This is Chris Krohn for Talk of the Bays, What's Left of the Left. We'll be right back in a Santa Cruz second. Welcome back. What's left of the Santa Cruz left? This is Talk of the Bay. I'm your host, Chris Krohn. On today's show, the discussion will center around those tall buildings going up all around. It used to be just downtown, but now they're planning to put them in your neighborhood too. Are they affordable? Who will live in them? Locals or out-of-towners? And are we seeing the end of the once great funky beach town redolent with hippie and surfer vibes and turning instead toward, quote, pervasive gentrification? Patrick Range McDonald describes the Santa Cruz of today in his book Selling Off California in the following way. Politicians take massive amounts of campaign cash from the real estate industry, and in many ways they're selling off the country's largest state to developers, landlords, and real estate lobbyists. So it's not just happening in Santa Cruz, but this is where we live and where some of us are choosing to take a stand. This show really gets to the impetus. The show got its impetus from a Sunday opinion piece written by one of our guests, Laura Lee. The title claims that Santa Cruz is moving to, quote, pervasive gentrification. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph. At a recent community meeting, a prominent Santa Cruz city leader refuted a respected resident calling accurate information BS. This arrogant posture by one of our senior official highlights the normalization of disinformation and intent to control and confuse citizens. In reality, this leader is an agent of a pervasive scheme of gentrification as explained in Patrick McDonald's book, Selling Off California, and reiterated by Peter Moskowitz's book, How to Kill a City. So what we're going to do is turn to our guests. We have Lira Filippini, Frank Barron, John Hall, and Laura Lee. Lira Filippini graduated from UC Santa Cruz with a degree in sociology in 2006 and fell in love with Santa Cruz. Promptly after moving back in 2019, she became aware of the new state laws that threatened to change the city's shape, size, and demographics forever. Lira has been engaged with various local neighborhood and land use organizations facing market rate development issues. She was also the co-chair of the Measure O campaign in 2022. Lira Filippini, welcome to Talk of the Bay.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Start us off. Any reactions to Laura's piece? Is pervasive gentrification taking place in Santa Cruz?
Absolutely good, but it's going to be slow to actually see that progress. It's going to take a long time for a lot of these buildings that are going to be, first approved and then go through the permitting process and then finally built and then people move in and then the AMI, which is area median income, is going to go up, making it harder and harder for everybody else to live here and changing what it means to have, quote, affordable housing. And so it actually might take like 12 plus years for people to really realize how gentrified we become.
So it happens slowly, so it kind of creeps up.
Yes.
Well, when I go downtown, a lot of the buildings not creeping. It looks like it's in full gallop mode. Frank Barron is a retired urban and regional planner with 30 years of experience working at public agencies throughout the Monterey Bay. He was one of the proponents of Measure M, the right to vote on height of these big buildings going up in Santa Cruz right now. Frank Barron, welcome to Talk of the Bay.
Thank you, Chris.
Do you agree with the essence of the article about pervasive gentrification? And has local government been displaced by realtor and development interests ahead of neighborhood interests?
Yes. The state laws that have recently passed to encourage more affordable housing have taken a lot of control away from the local city and county governments. I don't know how much we can do about that. I know there are some efforts on the state level to battle that. I'm not sure how far that's getting. Or where that'll end up. I think that what's happening downtown right now, there's one major project that we do still have some control over, and that would be the Downtown Plan Expansion Project. And so that's going through the process right now. There's going to be an environmental impact report coming out later this year, and the public really needs to get engaged. Right now, the first part of that is just the plan itself, and there's a comment period through July 10th. And I encourage people to log on, look at Downtown Plan Expansion, Google that, and check it out, comment on it, and then when the EIR comes out, that's going to be another opportunity to really have an impact.
And it's really easy to just get on to the Santa Cruz website. All you got to do is put City of Santa Cruz into your browser, and also add projects list, and you get amazing. Well, you can see it all right there. You can see what's being planned and what's being built in Santa Cruz. John Hall is a research professor of sociology at UC Santa Cruz and UC Davis. He's also a church representative for the Peace Church Housing Project up there on the Upper West Side of Santa Cruz, and co-chair of Our Downtown, Our Future. John Hall, welcome to Talk of the Bay.
Great to be here. Thanks, Chris.
What is your view of development going on in Santa Cruz right now? Are we gentrifying? You're involved deeply with a project that has some affordability, but some
9 units, over 20%, almost 25% affordable, according to city standards, and then another 5 units that are co-housing units. So yeah, it is affordable, and it's an example of what can be done to create more affordable housing. But I think the problem is that we do have a housing crisis, and there's a rock and a hard place here. How do we deal with the housing crisis that we have, with the climate crisis that is further driven by people commuting long distances to get to work? How do we deal with the inequity of people who work in Santa Cruz but can't afford to live here? Those things are absolutely wrong. At the same time, we have a process that has created housing, probably of the wrong type of housing for the people who really need it. And I don't know that it's pervasive gentrification. There are a lot of neighborhoods in Santa Cruz where it's not occurring, but it is certainly in the development. The new development is gentrified development, and that has potential really unfortunate consequences, to say the least, for the character of Santa Cruz as a community.
Let me burrow into the project that you're working on. You said 9 affordable. How many market rate? And did you have to was there a real tense conversation, or what were the conversations like about whether for the church to support all market rate, half or half affordable, half market?
Well, we would have liked to have done more affordable than that, but that's 9 affordable units. 5 additional units that are affordable by design, the co-housing units, out of 40 units. So that's, 26 units that are market rate units. And the reality is that even though the church is providing the land, and so that's a subsidy right there, that the developer has to make enough money off of the affordable unit, off the market rate units, to help subsidize the affordable units. So the economics of it is something we need to pay a lot of attention to.
And the was there much pushback by the neighbors? This is a project that's taking place Upper West Side on High and right near Bayview School.
Right, Westlake
Excuse
School.
me, Westlake School.
Yeah, no, the church congregation from the very beginning wanted to have 25% minimum affordable. The neighbors, there were a few neighbors that did push back. Some of them, we had community meetings, and they decided maybe this isn't a bad thing after all. Others appealed first to the Planning Commission, and then when the Planning Commission said, don't appeal this to the City Council, please, they went ahead and appealed it to the City Council, and their appeal was denied.
Okay, Laura Lee is with us. She wrote this opinion piece for the Santa Cruz Sentinel. She has a degree in psychology and education and is taught in both the public and corporate sector. She later moved into teaching communication skills and holistic health. And a fun fact about Laura is that she worked on a vegan burger called Humburger, which led to patenting of this food product. She also worked in the financial services industry since 1981 and is now retired and enjoys exploring the Bay Area's scenic outdoor spaces and participating in a wide variety of cultural activities. Laura Lee, welcome to Talk of the Bay.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote this article that appeared in the Santa Cruz Sentinel this past Sunday. It's an article that really contesting the vision that local government developers and real estate people have for Santa Cruz. It's titled Santa Cruz Moving to Pervasive Gentrification. What spurred you to write this opinion piece?
Well, listening to the people here and fighting for both Measure O and for Measure M, I really felt engaged, and I learned a lot from the people here. And yet, when we lost these measures, I really felt really sad and angry because I thought my leaders would listen to me. I voted for these leaders. So the feeling of disempowerment hurt me. And then I listened to Frank and I heard, well, the consequences of what they're proposing in the downtown area affects my neighborhood. And I don't think people realize the dangers that just ignoring climate change and the loss of sunshine has on the people that live here. And I feel like I represent the concerns that people are talking about.
Lira Filippini, you worked intensely, at least on one of these initiatives, Measure O. Why do you think we are losing? Is it our message? Is it that we're being outspent? Do we just have a 60-40 city? 60% want this development, 40% don't want it?
Well, I think a lot of people actually don't vote. And the people that do vote, I think, are average people. I mean, some of them very, very intelligent, very responsible as well. But, we're talking just average people trying to survive. And so their days are already consumed with, the daily humdrum of their lives and just keeping their families sheltered and fed and their jobs fulfilled. And so I think that for the most part, we've created our own personal and network of, kind of psychological structures that we listen to. So, for instance, we may identify as Democrats, and so when it's time to vote, we just look down the line, and if it's a choice between a Democrat and a Republican, we're going to vote for a Democrat, and we're not going to actually look at what's this person's background, what's their voting history, and how are they likely to vote on some of these key issues. And one of the things that really has come to my attention over the years, and this is kind of like a broader philosophical aspect when it comes to politics and political science, is that when you have a two-party system, it's whatever party is in control, and that includes at just the California state level, whatever party that's in control is the one that is primarily targeted for corruption. And they'll both always be targeted to some degree. But the one that's in control, why would you put more of your effort into the one that is not in control and not in control for quite a while? And so I think that we actually need to all start considering reading more closely into who we're voting for, what measures we're voting for, and talking about, sending a message at some point. And that means maybe actually considering, I know that this is a touchy subject, but voting outside our personal party lines.
So, you're talking about the lens of Democrat, Republican. How do we reframe or frame the ballot measures in those terms, because you would have to then have a Republican ballot measure or a Democrat ballot measure. And pretty much, 85% of the people in Santa Cruz call themselves Democrats. So is there any way of reframing ballot measure that gets into this low voter education that you're talking about, that people necessarily don't go out and educate themselves about initiatives and they vote party line on candidates?
Well, when it comes to the ballot measures, I think actually the majority of people don't spend the time to read the actual ballot measure, and maybe a little bit, larger of the population actually go and look at one or both sides' websites. But I think even that is relatively rare, and I think that people mostly, once again, it's their social networks. They talk to each other. They look at what organizations they've heard of are supporting or opposing that ballot measure, and we've created a kind of sociopolitical network here in Santa Cruz that for right now is trusting a political network that has kind of been guided by the power elite, and most people who are voting that way actually don't realize that.
Frank Barron, former planner and co-authored, I think, the Measure M that just was on the ballot this past March. What's your take? Why did we not get more than 42%, or I forget what the outcome was, but it lost, handily. If you had to do it again, how would you do it differently?
Probably having it in November would have been better. We put it on the March ballot because we thought that the city was going to be acting more quickly and that we needed to rush it and get it, to cut them off at the pass, essentially. But now it looks like we definitely would have time if we had done November. So that would have increased turnout, number one. We probably should have also made it more simple. A simpler message would have been to our advantage. I've heard some feedback that we probably should not have had the 25% affordable component, that was something that was a little bit a bridge too far. That's why we got so much opposition from the affordable housing community. If we didn't have that component, it would have been just, vote on height. And it would have been simpler. I think it would have passed.
John Hall, do you agree with the 25% of nothing is nothing? That seemed to be a constant refrain from the opposition to Measure M, and also really Measure O, when you were going to designate the parking lots for affordable housing.
Well, certainly Measure O was complex, or at least it could be made to seem complex. It was actually pretty straightforward, but the opposition spent a lot of money to claim that it was complex. There's a tendency, I think, of voters, unless they're convinced of something, to vote no on something. That's their default position. The one thing I would have had us done differently in the Measure O campaign was to legally contest the ballot wording that the city attorney came up with in the August before the election, which was confusing and biased. And if we had known at the time the depth of financial donations that it later turned out we could get, and sort of trusted that, we could have spent the money on getting the ballot measure reworded and had a more positive result. But the other thing is, I think the 60-40% split is pretty real, or 55-45%. And that's something that we really have to deal with. There's a component of the voting public that is indifferent to the character of downtown, that's indifferent to the character of communities, that is fine living in a world that is suburban and going to shopping centers. And that's the world of many people who live in Santa Cruz. It's a different world than the world of people that live on the east side and in other neighborhoods on the west side. So I think one thing we need to understand, that this is a disaster that has been created in part by post-World War II development, post-World War II zoning, that created neighborhoods that are deserts as far as anything happening except single-family housing. We don't have the diversity of community housing in neighborhoods that other cities our size, Boulder, Colorado, Eugene, Oregon, to name two, have. So I think that's a real historical legacy. And then the other side of it is that the more people who come in here who are kind of part of a community that is gentrified, the more indifferent they are to the kinds of issues that matter for working people, and the more indifferent they are to housing justice.
Laura Lee, you worked on Measure M. Was this your first time that you got politically involved, or have you been doing stuff like this your whole life?
Well, I did a little for Measure O, and then when Measure M came around, and I was basically taken aghast when I saw the site of that building downtown, I just felt really offended. I feel that part of what is missing is community cooperation with the council. It's this win-lose mentality. And I feel in both measures, it was, we're going to win at all costs. And that meant distorting the message, raising a lot of money, and confusing voters. And that's something that's deeply troubling because it's national and international. But right now, experiencing it at a local level is frightening, absolutely frightening, because like Lira was saying, I voted for the city council we have. I trusted the democratic system. And now I recognize when I go to meetings, I'm really not being heard. I'm really being dismissed. And I even presented, or Susan, I gave a book called Cities for People. There are places all over this country who are using different methods to develop. And as Frank and Lira have taught me, that we really have met our housing needs, and all of this is for the benefit of a certain class of people that deserve to have good things, but not at the expense of the environment and of the social network that I am a part of.
Met our housing needs in terms of for the upper income or the market rate housing needs.
Right. Because I live in a small little community that is 9 homes, and when I bought the house in '98, everybody owned the house. Now we have people coming in from out of the area, purchasing homes and renting to students. That's fine. But that trend of Airbnb and renting, there's a certain difficulty with maintaining interconnection between our communities.
Lira Filippini, have you noticed the playing field not being as level in a democracy that we have as one might like it? Starting with the city attorney, who is really the Santa Cruz city attorney, although he does work for the Santa Cruz City Council. He has really, I think, distorted a couple of the past ballot initiatives. And like John Hall was saying, you need a lot of money to contest this. We needed at least $10,000, and people didn't think that we could raise it at the time. In hindsight, maybe we could have. What do you think about just politics when they pass the district elections, when they pass direct election of mayor? We have this kind of political perfect storm that exists now, that you have a 4-year mayor who is just shepherding in the development projects. What I think that these people wanted, they didn't like it wasn't so stable. It wasn't a stable political environment in the past when you changed mayors every year and you had at-large elections. Now, it was supposed to be for a communities of color, and one of the things, there wasn't a Latina on the city council for many years, so let's make a district that might get a Latino elected. And that hasn't happened. I think we have gotten really real estate and developer, this is my own feeling, candidates. What do you see in terms of electioneering and how we might go about winning instead of losing?
I do not have the answer to how we could potentially win. I think that this conversation, though, does illuminate a lot of ways in which we can learn from our, past mistakes. But you touched on a couple of really important things, including like moving into, what was that, Measure E? The district voting was the way that was done. It actually separated communities that should have been together, that would have had better representation if they hadn't been separated. That is a crucial problem. And that actually happened on a larger congressional redistricting as well recently, where we were actually separated from the rest of the Monterey Bay community, and we used to always be with them, and now we're part of Assembly District 28, and we're part of like San Jose, and we have like a fairly different culture than San Jose. But that is one of the things I think a lot of the people in this room and a lot of progressives in Santa Cruz in general are really concerned about, is that it does seem like there is this kind of tidal force of political power that is actually aiming to create a type of like Silicon Valley by the sea here. And that is the aim. And, Laura touched on something where she said that we've built enough housing. What we've done is we've built the amount of housing that we were allocated to build in our last RENA cycle. But a really important part of that is that we actually more than doubled how many market rate units than we were actually required to build, and we barely scraped by on the affordable housing. And that's just what's going to keep on going on. I want to just point out one thing that's going to sound a little bit of a side note, but I think that it's the sort of things that we all need to be paying attention to and how this is going to actually be affecting our long-term livability here. And as John pointed out, the character of our neighborhoods. We have finite amount of land, especially in the areas like downtown, with very constricted land where most of the resources are. And what we're doing is with these new state laws and then our city council kind of just accepting them and not joining like more regional and statewide efforts to push back on that, what we're doing with this is things like this example. We've gotten rid of the parking requirements, even though we do see, more and more people driving hybrids and electric vehicles. We've gotten rid of the parking requirements, which actually makes it so that the developers that used to have to, in a way, they had to support transportation infrastructure by being required to actually provide a certain amount of parking on that property that they're developing into housing. And now they don't have to do that if they're anywhere near a planned quality transit stop. It doesn't have to be there right now. So we do not have the public transportation. But what's also happening is that these buildings are being built way out almost to the sidewalk with almost no setback. So the developers are also, if we're supposed to be moving towards public transportation and active transportation, they should be required to be donating some of that setback space. They should be required to donate space that we need for the active transportation. We do not have adequate active transportation here. We have, a high rate of car strikes for bikers, and we're creating a situation in which these buildings are going to go up in the next, 5 to 15 years, and they're going to stay there for 50 to 100 years. And that space that we need is not going to be there. So we're creating a problem for ourselves.
Look at the building across the street from the farmer's market now. That's right up to the sidewalk. There's not much room to walk. Yep. There's not much green space for folks there. Look at the food bin proposed project. They're going to require people not to have a car. Have you done any research into that? Can you do that legally? Can you require people not to have a car?
This is only the second time I've heard about that. And I don't know how that's possible to be legal.
We are going to take a break. We are here with our guests, our local housing and land use activists. If I can call you all activists, I think you are in some way. Lira Filippini, Frank Barron, John Hall, and Laura Lee. We'll be back for the second half hour, and we're going to talk about visioning. What's your vision for Santa Cruz? And I'm Chris Krohn, and this is Talk of the Bay. We'll be back in a Santa Cruz second.
Bullet holes in the cemetery walls, the black car, the Johnny of the beer, Spanish bombs on the Costa Rica, I'm flying in on a DC-10 tonight. Spanish bombs, yo te quiero infinito, yo te quiero, oh my corazón. Spanish bombs, yo te quiero infinito, yo te quiero, oh my corazón. Spanish weeks in my disco casino, the freedom fighters died up on the hill. They sang the red flag, they wore the black one after they died. It was Mockingbird Hill. Back from the buses, went up in flashes with Irish too, drenched in blood. Spanish bombs shatter the hotels, my senoritas also sniffed in the bar. Spanish bombs, yo te quiero infinito, yo te quiero, oh my corazón. Spanish bombs, yo te quiero infinito,
What is workforce rental? What are the rents that will be charged? And will folks who are present from building trades be able to live in these units?
First of all, it's the project, if we're successful, won't be available for at least 2 to 2.5 years. So I can't tell you exactly what the rents will be. I can tell you, I do know that there's a number of competing projects coming online. We're taking the risk that whatever the rent is, that this project will still work, and that's what I can tell you.
So we don't have folks who are present here, we're talking $3,500 for a 2-bedroom, maybe by that time $4,500, and maybe the market goes south. But if they continue to go up as we've seen in the last 4 years, rents rising 40+%, the rents could be as high as $4,500 for a 1-bedroom.
So no, I don't think that's possible.
We are back. This is Talk of the Bay. I'm your host, Chris Krohn, and just looking out the window here, seeing Bobby Bishop giving a shout out to his show. Love that show, Bobby. And also the Salsa Show is amazing. This is KSQD 90.7 and KSQD.org. We hope that you're either streaming or listening possibly in your car, you're driving home, wondering about the future of Santa Cruz. We've got 4 folks here who have been putting a lot of time and effort into looking at an alternative vision for this town. It didn't used to be an alternative, but now it's become alternative because Santa Cruz, the way building seems to be going, is just like anywhere USA. And we thought we were special, and I still believe we're special, but some of what we're architecting right now and what's getting put up. I got off the freeway the other day in San Jose off 280 and saw the same building that we got at Laurel and Pacific. It was right there. So they're just taking these blueprints and shoving them around the country or around the state and duplicating them. And it has nothing, that building has nothing to do with Santa Cruz history, has nothing, no reflection on who we are as a people, on what this community is and where it's been throughout its existence. Anyway, I'm back with John Hall, Laura Lee, Lira Filippini, and Frank Barron. I'm going to go to Frank Barron to talk a little bit about what is going to be the consequences down the line of all this development taking place right now in Santa Cruz.
Well, one of the things that we're going to run up against is water supply. We haven't had a real bad drought year for a while, but when we get into another really bad drought situation, which is probably going to happen, and we keep building all these new units. I mean, they say, oh yeah, the new units don't use nearly as much water, and it's not really a problem. But every one of these units is probably going to have a dishwasher, and they're going to be washing clothes and flushing toilets and everything. So we are going to run up against a water issue eventually. And right now, all of our water comes from what falls as rainfall in the county. We don't get any water. We don't get any water from the state water project. And the only way to augment that supply is either by a dam, which we got too many earthquake faults for that, or desal. And so the desal plant is going to be super expensive water. It's going to be very environmentally detrimental, and it's going to be subject to a vote as well. And so that's going to be their next big play. Is going to be, in order to keep, building skyscraper on top of skyscraper in Santa Cruz, which is kind of the plan, that they're going to need water, and they're going to be coming, to the voters to say, oh, we need desal.
Laura Lee, you mentioned in your piece about the vote and the fact that most people actually didn't vote, or I guess 51% voted and as a whole, and 29% of the total vote voted against Measure M, the right to vote on height. Also in your piece, you were talking about sort of the coziness of the mayor and the money he raised, the amount he raised, $49,800 more than his opponent. And I personally think he could have raised 3 times what he raised if he wanted to, if he thought he needed it. The money was there for him as much as possible. So if we had a more, I don't want to say serious candidate, because I think Joyce Schendeldecker was very serious. If we had somebody who's a little more, popular and he felt like it was a competitive race, I think $100,000, $150,000, similar to what they spend on supervisorial races, would that money would be there. What are your thoughts on that the fact that people did not vote, the outcome of the election doesn't really represent many people in Santa Cruz, less than a third.
Well, that I think is indicative of the hard fact that messaging against the measure and messaging of win-lose, like we have to win or otherwise we're not going to have affordable housing, or the developers are going to run away. The scare tactic was evident because it wasn't really representative to people that I talk with. And I think the fact that we have to really come to terms with a system that is biased for corporate benefit. It's a long history. This is nothing new. But power and influence don't necessarily have to include greed. And I think we're looking about a lot of greed that developers and city planners overlook and don't really acknowledge. It's like because they're winning. And that winning is not really winning in the long run. And I feel that's what calls me to write. I have a longer view, and I have a sensitivity that I want good things for other people. I don't necessarily think that a second home for someone else should deprive someone of a home.
John Hall, Laura Lee writes in her piece, however, our decision makers are aligned with gentrification policies, showing less concern about deleterious wealth inequality and a loss of our functional democracy. As citizens lose hope and become disenfranchised, they stop voting. You've dealt a lot with the city, and I think your project now is taking, 2-3 years to come to
7
years without breaking ground yet. So you know some of the ins and outs and some of the players. Do you think that we have a city council that is kind of actively, if it's below the radar, pursuing gentrification policy?
Well, that's a complicated question, I think.
You're a sociologist.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to give you a complicated answer. Urban planners talk about the urban growth machine, okay? The urban growth machine, and this is something across the United States, is a coalition of developers, realtors, and power holders and governments that is interested in city growth. And there are a variety of reasons for it, according to whether you're a developer or the city government. The city government, especially in Santa Cruz, has a real revenue crisis. And so growth is their solution to try to deal with that, being able to pay people their retirement pensions. But the problem, it seems to me, is that Santa Cruz, more than other cities, lacks a civic culture, or has historically lacked a civic culture. It did not have the kind of, I don't know what you would say, enlightened bourgeoisie that other cities around the country have had, that said, okay, we want to have parks. All right, we want to have mixed kinds of development in different neighborhoods and so forth. And so now the city council is, I think, especially after the recall election, after the failure of rent control, Measure O and Measure M, basically the developers and the urban growth machine, they feel like they have carte blanche. And the problem with that is that they basically, I don't want to call people Philistines, but there is an absence of vision and a pursuit of greed that get in the way of building a livable city. I believe, and I've seen other examples, and we see, anyone who travels in Europe sees examples of cities where people can live in pretty dense urban situations in ways that have a sense of community to them. In Santa Cruz, you're not going to want to walk down the sidewalk on Front Street. That's how bad that development at Pacific and Laurel and Front Street is. They are not building the community aesthetics that we need to have. And as I think, I can't remember who said it, but these buildings are going to be here for 50, 75 years.
Lira said
We're
it.
stuck with them.
Yeah, Lira said that, and
Yeah.
and the sidewalks. If you want to walk on those sidewalks, you're going to have to make yourself thinner. If you want to walk with your partner or a friend or something like that, because they're not doing the wide sidewalks. Laura Lee, go ahead.
Well, I looked at the picture that they put on the website, and they have these tall buildings, and they have this beautiful sunny plaza. And it was like, there's not going to be a lot of sun in that plaza. It's all going to be shaded. And I was talking to a developer who lives down in that area, and he said, the wind tunnel that's going to come through that area with the tall buildings, I don't see people wanting to sit out there. But the way the message is being manipulated, and this is, I think, a problem nationally, that people just get those sound bites. Oh, we're going to get an arena, and it's not going to. The growth isn't going to be in your neighborhood. It will be downtown, and you'll have all these nice restaurants.
We have an arena.
That was the other thing I just want to bring up. I went to the symphony on Saturday, was exquisite. Our symphony is so wonderful, and being able to foster and highlight and appreciate our culture here is what is missing. I think that just to think, well, are they going to abandon the civic arena? Why aren't the developers going to refurbish our civic? What are we getting? What are we getting back from giving up what we think is
They
art?
have abandoned on various occasions when they've moved music events to the tent, as I call it, where the Warriors play. Lira, you're following some of these projects, or maybe all of these projects, and maybe you're following some more intensely than others. But I'm looking at the Food Bin Project, the Cruise Hotel Project. The Food Bin Project is at Laurel and Highway 1 or Mission Street. Cruise Hotel is right there at the corner of Front Street and Laurel, and we'll have this pool on top of it. Folks should really check out the artwork of Russell Boucher. He's done some marvelous stuff, depictions of what Santa Cruz might look like after all this building is going on. And he's doing an art opening on July 5th at 5 o'clock, and it's going to be open from July 5th to July 14th. If you want to see some alternative depictions of where we're going, it's at the Felix Culpa Gallery right there on Elm Street between Cedar and Pacific Avenue. But then you have the Workbench Project, which is talking 16 stories or more behind the town clock. And then you have the Swenson Project on Soquel and Front Street. Those are the ones that, my mind is already boggled. When I look at the website, I'm looking at like 20 or 30 different projects they have on the city website, some just extraordinary projects. Lira Filippini, you've been following some of this stuff for a while. What's your sense of what's being built and how it's being built and why?
Well, the why, I think we've already touched on, is that we've been told that there's a housing crisis, and part of that is true. We have an affordable housing crisis. We do not have a housing crisis. I think we should all start calling it what it is. It's an affordable housing crisis. We do not have enough affordability here. And that includes for students. Being so close to Silicon Valley and then having UC Santa Cruz here those are two of the big kind of demographics that are creating a housing burden on us. But the students are actually, it would be unfair to ask them to go live over the hill and then come to school over here. Like, we actually do need to make sure there's enough housing for the students. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that, we should be demonizing the students. They're actually suffering because of this situation.
Totally suffering. They're being invited to an untenable situation,
Absolutely.
And I see those tours up on campus, tour after tour after tour of just, groups of 20 and 30. Like, where are you going to live? Where are you going to live? They're doing something that's really a child abuse. I'm sorry.
It is. Well, because they're not being told. The students are not being told that there isn't housing here for them and how difficult it's going to be for them to find housing. And so, it's one of the demographics, I think, that are actually really suffering the most from this. But these buildings that are coming down the pipeline, the vast majority of them are market rate. We have that local law that says that at least 20% have to be affordable, 20% of the units. However, with the new state laws, and specifically the state density bonus law, it gets whittled down and diluted a great deal, usually to being around 13% affordable. And these state laws then allow the developers to build much taller and wider. So we're losing setbacks. We're building right out to the curb. We're losing sun because we're building much higher than our local, general plan and zoning dictates we should be building. And we are creating, as someone mentioned, wind tunnels.
Go to San Jose. There's wind tunnels all over San Jose when I walk around.
And someone else pointed out probably about a year back that actually this is also defensive architecture. It is I think meant to make people uncomfortable and not feel invited while they're out front and walking by. And to some extent, I think that it's just a result of them trying to maximize that footprint and maximize the profit that they're getting out of that footprint. But I also believe that there is actually some purpose behind it because they're trying to make it uninviting for people who are houseless to, what they say, is loiter around outside. And so, we are creating a space, though, that no one's going to want to be in. And we are not going to have enough sidewalks or bike lanes. And we definitely don't have enough public transportation right now. And we are going to see our demographics change more and more because a lot of this housing is not for the students who really need it or the lower income residents and neighbors who need it. So, honestly, I try not to go to what's called the significant projects page of the city's website. Yes, shield it from my eyes. Thank you. Because it is, it actually is triggering. It feels, my mother actually said she felt like we're being assaulted. We can't do anything about it. And it's hard to talk to people about it because a lot of people don't know enough about it to see what, there's this complex system of issues that we're talking about today.
Making it livable when you're building. In many cities around California, well, around the world anyway, they build walkways around these projects. They paint beautiful murals on the outside of these temporary walkways. Instead, in this city, the developers are running roughshod, I guess, over the planning department. They brought the fences out that took the bike lane and the sidewalk all around that building at Laurel and Pacific, and it's happening. It's now a trend. All the buildings, if you want to walk here, you have to walk on the other side of the street. Okay. So the remaining time, I want each of us to take a minute or two to talk about what they might see. We always hear these things about the progressives are always good at saying no and they stopping projects and stuff. Of course, we put forward 5 ballot initiatives to say yes on. But what's your vision for Santa Cruz? What would you like to see happen? But also, how can you make it happen? John Hall's involved in a project that seems to be coming to fruition after 7 years. That seems to be a bright spot where you have some affordable units and you have mixed incomes. That's what I'd like to see, mixed income levels living together in buildings. But I'm going to start with Frank Barron, and I'm going to go to Lira and right around the horn here. And what's your, take a minute or two to say what your vision is for the future of Santa Cruz.
Well, pragmatically, the state has already taken away a lot of our local power, but we do have some local decisions that we can make that can really make a difference in what the city is going to become. And this downtown plan expansion project is one of them. The city council it's probably a done deal that they're going to, improve, the plan to raise the heights up to, 14 plus stories. Well, 12 they say, but it's probably going to end up being more. They could, if they wanted to, keep it at 8. But the other thing that where local control is going to be, one way we're going to have local control is when it comes to that water issue. That's something where, in order to keep growing, the city is going to have to increase its water supply, and that's going to have to be desal. And there was one successful local initiative that requires that any desal project go to a vote of the people. So we will have some say in that matter. And that's going to be a big, it's going to be a lot of money and saying, yes, we need desal, you don't want to, die of thirst, do you? Anyway, that's what's going to be coming up next. That's going to be one thing that we can do where we can say, okay, we don't have enough water. We have to, slow down.
Thank you, Frank. Lira.
I could say a lot about what my vision of what the future of Santa Cruz could be, but I think that instead I should probably say, the few things I think that we can each do individually to get to a livable, sustainable, affordable, and inviting vibrant community here. And I think the main thing we need to start doing is actually asking questions of each other, talking. If you have a knee-jerk reaction to vote a certain way, maybe actually take the time to read what the opposing viewpoints are. Really look at that. Look at the evidence and the links that they provide. Spend at least an hour on each thing in front of you that you're going to be voting on, and then actually vote. I think that those are the most important things, and we need to really start talking to each other. We need to really start listening, and we need to get involved in local politics if we want to see our local community thrive.
Get involved. Laura.
I'm going to build on that because I learned everything from the people in this room. And so I want to encourage people to tap into the information that is available to them. And one of the things that inspired me from learning was there's so many other communities that are using different methods. One is Congress for a New Urbanism. There's also a big forum that's happening in 2025, SPUR, which are real estate developers and nonprofits coming together to solve affordable housing. To believe that there is an alternative is something I want to ask our viewers and listeners to really ponder, because the disinformation and the manipulation tends to disenfranchise people. And I say, be inspired. We can do something if we talk to each other and we're willing to investigate some other ideas that are happening all over the country.
Thank you. John Hall.
Okay, well, I think the first thing to start out with is politics and power. And there may be some voter remorse out there, people who have seen, oh, gee, that food bin project doesn't really look quite like what I had hoped for the West Side, or so forth. So I don't know that we're going to be able to govern the city by having voter initiatives. I think the key to power is the city council and the mayor. And we have to get much better at finding candidates that can talk the talk and walk the walk of city government and will appeal to a broad spectrum of people. We also, before that happens, we need to talk to people on the city council, not appearing in front of city council meetings. That's fine too, but one-on-one, say, I want to meet with you. Renee Golder got a lot of people meeting with her about the food bin project. And that caused, that sort of gummed up the works a little bit for the developer, not as much as we would have liked to have seen. But so meeting with city council members, that seems to me crucial. The second thing I think is really important is we need to move away, and I'm not going to get into the whole YIMBY debate here, but I think really, Chris, you ought to have a single program, standalone program on YIMBY ideology. But we need.
It was in my notes, John. But
Okay, well, we can't do everything, right? But we need social housing. We need housing that is affordable housing and there are a variety of mechanisms for it. That's what we need to emphasize. And in relation to that, then we need to emphasize and prioritize developing community spaces in relation to neighborhoods and in relation to social housing, so that you have places, public places, that people can hang out in. The first example of that that's going to come along and confront us is what happens with, assuming that they ever do build the Lot 4 project, what happens to the old library and the parking lot next to it and the farmers market. That will be a real opportunity for us to create the kind of example of what is possible in other neighborhoods in Santa Cruz.
Thank you all. We've got a minute or two left here, and I just want to repeat what folks have said. First, I want to say that there is the state mandate issue. Sometimes it's not as bad as we're being told by our mayor and city council, that the city council's mandated to build all this stuff. There's several cities in California that are fighting back, and the city, a city council, not the one we have now, could join themselves with those lawsuits and say, no, we want our sovereignty. We're not going to be forced by the state, because we know in Santa Cruz for a long time we've been building affordable housing, and we've met, we've already met the market rate, what they say we're supposed to build. So that would be one thing I think that a future city council could do to stop, I think, this sort of madness that's going on. Santa Monica, for example, has been fighting this for a while, just like they fought district elections for a long time. And somebody said talking to people, talking to your neighbors, talking it up about these issues, finding candidates that represent community interests, meeting with your city council candidates, as John Hall just said. He's got another one.
Another idea, if you want to get involved and you want to be informed, our Downtown, Our Future has a newsletter that goes out periodically, especially when there are important issues. If you're interested in signing up for that newsletter, please email me at jrhall103@mac.com. I'm going to repeat that
one more time,
because jrhall103@mac.com, and we'll get you on the newsletter list. And that's one way to start your first step.
Don't forget to visit your city council members too, as John Hall was saying, and talk it up about social housing and social space. We did a poll years ago, and why do people come to Pacific Avenue? It wasn't to shop. The majority of people didn't come to Pacific Avenue. Shopping happened after they got there, but most of the time it was to see other people, meet their friends, hang out, have a space. And we're losing that in Santa Cruz. I think if there was going to be another ballot initiative, I think we should have one for closing Pacific Avenue. People have been supportive of that for years and years. It just never made it to the ballot. We're going out on the song Spanish Bombs by The Clash. This show is about getting informed and getting involved. Don't mourn, organize. Good luck and good night, Santa Cruz.
Rock the province, I'm hearing music from another time. Spanish bombs, Costa Brava, I'm flying in on a DC-10 tonight. Spanish bombs, yo te quiero y bonito, yo te quiero, oh my corazón. Spanish bombs, yo te quiero y bonito, yo te quiero, oh my corazón.